Just like Thursday, the boat in trouble. This time, Elmora was able to wriggle off the hook with 1:30 to go, and now they hold a favored position.
Not gonna have it. They close to each other. Yeah, only good picture. Okay, pretty good, yeah.
Game here is to get up to full speed. Kayard makes his move first, and he'll be going faster when the gun goes off.
Go down below the line. 20. 17. 14. 13. 4, 3, 2, 1, done.
Another clean start and another good job by Dellenbaugh.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. This ought to be an interesting show. We've got quite the topic. It's a hot topic, and it's a topic you never see a couple of trans women talking about out in front of a crowd. Usually, it's a couple of cis guys with attitude about, well, I think sex is this, I think gender is this, I think this, that, and the other thing. Trans women, hardly ever there. I don't know, trans women athletes who've competed at in elite sport, hardly ever there. Nobody ever wants to talk to us. They don't want to see us on the screen. So guess what? This trans girl is going to be on the screen with that trans girl over there. And Karleigh Chardonnay Webb, why don't you introduce yourself?
First, Stephanie, thank you for having me on. This has been incredible. And what you do in sailing is top notch all the way. And I know you got a big regatta coming up, and I wish you the best. Good luck and good hunting out there. My name is Karleigh Chardonnay Webb. My pronouns are she, her. I am a writer contributor currently for Outsports.com. I've been a working journalist for 30 years. I'm celebrating my 30th year in the business this year, and it's been quite a ride. I've covered a number of world championship sporting events, and I'm also a competitive athlete. I'm a runner. I'm a multi-event duathlete, triathlete. I play softball. I play a ton of sports. I'm going to get into dodgeball this fall and speed skating this fall, and I also played women's semi-pro tackle football this past year. My return to the field after over 3 decades. And in my first year in the Women's Tackle Football League, I performed well enough to be named by my peers in the league as a league all-star. So I come with a little bit of credentials. I mean, nothing as big as what Stephanie's done in her sport, but I'm looking forward to having a good exchange. And oh, by the way, Stephanie, I want to ask a question. Number one, was that the 87 America's Cup?
That was the 92 America's Cup.
Okay, that was 92.
That was America Huge versus Il Moro de Venezia. Paul Kayard was driving Il Moro, and Buddy Melgus and Bill Koch were the co-helmsmen. Bill Koch was the skipper. Buddy Melgus was the primary helm. I think they gave Bill the wheel when they were going downwind some, but I actually built some sails for that boat for America Cube. That's really? I was there in San Diego for a bit, and it was quite the experience.
Stephanie, before we get deep into it, I do want to ask this, because this year is the 40th anniversary of when the America's Cup changed in a drastic way. The longest winning streak in sports was broke 40 years ago this fall.
Yes,
40 years ago,
they had to unbolt the trophy from the trophy room at the New York Yacht Club, and they replaced it with Dennis Conner's head.
No, but give Dennis Conner credit. It also led to one of the greatest comeback stories in sports in my lifetime. to see Dennis Conner, after losing that streak and taking the shots that he took, to come back, build a new boat, build a syndicate, learn from what the Australians taught, and then go down the Fremantle and get the cup back on their soil.
Yeah, Fremantle was a cool series. I think Fremantle was the last 12-meter series. That was the last. That was the last 12-meter series.
Then when the Kiwis, if I remember right, came with the challenge but didn't read the fine print. That's the first thing. Always read the fine print.
That's right. And Dennis went with a catamaran, and the Kiwis went with a monohull.
Monohull. I mean, I don't know a lot about sailing, but I know this much: a big monohull has no shot against a caddy. It has no chance.
Not really. Well, technology's changed a wee bit. I think a foiling monohull would have a bit of a shot, but probably not that good of a shot. But anyway, after that debacle, the America's Cup class, which is a box rule, came into effect for America's Cup competition. America's Cup competition is a match race, which is why you only saw 2 boats there.
Right.
And that rule, the 92 America's Cup was the first America's Cup where they used those boats. So it was a huge learning curve for everybody involved, for every syndicate involved. And people were designing a new boat, new sails. I mean, if you look at the put that thing up here one last time, it's like like you can this is fuzzy because it's old footage, but anyway, if you look at the top of the main sail, the aft sail on America Cubed, which is the boat at the bottom of the screen, you can see that it's a flat head. And on the mainsail on Il Moro has that more traditional look. So a lot of innovation took place during the 92 America's Cup, all over the board in terms of sail design, in terms of sail engineering. And the sail design part was the part that we were deeply involved with, and it was all kinds of fun. But anyway, we're not here to talk about sailing, although we could do that at some point in time. We're here to talk about trans women, and I'm going to say and sport, because I think that we are trans women in sport, the 2 of us, but I think in a broader context, sport is a larger picture for a lot of folks, and a number of times. Let me get this stupid sailing crap off the screen again. And the thing is, often in discussions about trans, I'd say trans people or trans athletes, but it never seems to be the focus of people when they start talking about trans people in sport. It's usually trans women in sport. We will get into some of the reasons that is, I'm sure. But I guess where I'd like to start, if you don't mind, is maybe talk a little bit about why sport. What is it about sport that captivates people's interest?
We just showed how it captivates people's interest. No matter what the sport is, at one level, people just love good stories. And sport provides stories. We just talked about one of the great stories in sports, losing the largest win streak in the history of sport, and then having to go into Australian waters and get the cup back. People love that. And sports provides
By the way, that win streak was 132 years. That's a long time.
Yes. But we love that story. Why does the Miracle on Ice still resonate? Even with people who weren't born when that happened. I was in 3rd grade when that hockey game was played. Sport can be a unifying thing for any culture. I mean, sport is global. I mean, we had a great World Swimming Championship earlier this year in Budapest, and then we returned to Budapest, even though it is ran by probably the most LGBTQ unfriendly head of state in the European Union or the NATO alliance, and Viktor Orban. We're back in Budapest, and just last week we had a great World Track and Field Championships. So much drama, so much emotion, so much intensity, and a lot of great stories came of it. And just look, we just had college football, and who's everybody talking about? Even people who don't like sports know who Deion Sanders is. And in part because his legend just grew by taking a team that was 1-11, bringing a whole new group of kids in, and then going out and beating a team that played in the national championship game last year. For the most part, we love sports. You know, what do they say on Wide World of Sports? The human drama of athletic competition. We love it. And that's what captivates people's interest. Now, within this issue, however, this issue in many ways, the people that are trying to sell you this hysteria are playing into that. They're playing into that love of sports. They're playing into those quote unquote good, wholesome values that sports portrays and teaches to try and sell a certain narrative for a certain social political agenda. And trust me, the people that are the professional transphobes, we're going to get into this tonight. The professional transphobes, they know how to push those buttons. They know how to tweak that nerve. They know how to play on this. So that's how sports has gotten entwined in this issue. And that's how they're using sport to sell issues that are far beyond sports.
Now, I found it pretty interesting in listening to folks that talk about this issue. There'll be people that will say, well, I mean, I can think of a couple of content creators who will take this position. I really don't care much about sport, but I'm concerned about advantages and disadvantages. So I want to address the issue of what do you think are some advantages in competitive sport?
Advantages as far as what, though? What are we talking about?
Physical advantages for in terms of one's athletic ability. I'll list them off. That's athletic ability, training,
right?
Athletic ability, access.
That's a big one.
Access to a field, training, access to training, access to practice time. There are a number of things. Access to facilities. I think we covered that as well. I think those are some advantages in competitive sport, and I wonder if you can think of any others that might come up in the discussion.
Well, I think you've hit a lot of the major ones, but also there's a matter of things such as what are we talking about in terms of which sports are we talking about? Because there are general advantages in it that permeate through a number of sports, no question. But really, as in regards to this issue, we have to look sport to sport. You cannot have one size fits all regulations for each sport. At the basic periphery, you could, but ultimately you have to get sport to sport because every sport requires something different. Every sport has different skills which make you more effective. They have different modes of training that make you more effective. As far as the general advantages you're talking about, to me, two of the biggest are the GPS coordinates of where you were born. In many ways, that's the first major advantage in sport.
Yeah, actually, that's a good one. Economic ability to participate.
Yes, because I mean, but also that's the other side. These advantages balance out. Kenya is a poor country compared to the developed world. So is Ethiopia, so is Eritrea. But when you look at the top times from 1,500 meters up to the marathon, who's up front?
Mhm.
Who's up front? And why are they
Southwest
up front?
Africa, another one, and
Yeah.
you know that Namibia,
And one of the biggest
country.
reasons why they are up front is because running is a part of that culture. Let's face it, you become a pretty good runner when you run 5 miles of school every day. And you're at altitude. I mean, why do you think top milers from around the world, top 3 milers, top 10K athletes, top marathoners are training in Kenya? Because that's where the altitude is. That's where the altitude is. That's where the competition is. That's where you go. I mean, it's like anything else. How do you get the Carnegie Hall practice? How do you beat a Kenyan? Learn how to train like them. And so there are so many advantages. And but in regards to this issue, I think people overstate a lot. They overstate a lot of these advantages and they leave out the major variables, which is what the regulations call for. And a lot of this comes from, frankly, it comes from 2 factors. Number one, you have a lot of people who have a lot of ignorance on how sports works, and they have a lot of ignorance on how transition works. And if there's one thing that I want people to remember tonight, it's that. If I want people to remember
that's
that
why
tonight,
we're here.
I think
that's why we're here.
You have a ton of people who are ignorant in the way sports works in a lot of ways, who are opining on this issue. And a lot of these people are stick and ball people. They look at sport through an American lens, which is a very limited lens in many respects. And then they don't know. And for the little that they actually know about the greater wide world of sports, they know even that much less about what Stephanie went through, what I go through, what other trans women go through, and what trans men go through as well, what non-binary people go through. They don't know the community. They don't know us as people, and they don't know the medical and clinical sides of what constitutes transition. And as important, one thing we have to point out is that not every trans person chooses medical procedures for their transition. But to participate in sports by regulation, you have to. So let's just clear that up right now. There's all the people who talk about things like, oh, self-ID is bad, self-ID. Anybody who tells you that there's self-ID going on in sports, they're not a serious person. Stop listening to them. Because there's regulations to this. You know, there are. As Fitson says, there's rules.
I do think that's. I think that we're going to get into that. Is that's we've covered a whole bunch of stuff. One thing we haven't covered yet, or haven't taken on, is what is fairness. What does fairness mean in sport? I mean, is it fair to have Michael Phelps winning gold medals? I mean, is there a point at which fairness is where all of those attributes of advantages in training, in athletic ability, in athletic suitability to a particular discipline, is there a point at which we acknowledge of a certain amount of unfairness with regard to certain people are going to have advantages and certain people are not? I mean, how does that work? Because these are more fundamental issues than trans women in sport. We're going to get into the aspects of transition and how things even out, and the false comparisons that are made between trans women and women in general to men and their in terms of athletic ability. But what about that idea, about the fundamental idea of fairness?
Well, I'm not sure. I have my own definition of that, Stephanie. And
for
to
it.
me, this is what fairness is in the sport. Fairness at the first level is, to me, it's simple. This is where fair comes into play. I'll give you an example, since a lot of people, I'll give you an example from track and field. And in fact, I'm going to give the example that I gave to many people who have problems with CC Telfer winning an NCAA championship back in 2019. This is what fair means to me. Number one, does everybody have to start from the same start from the designated starting line in their lane? That's the first part of fair. Secondly, and I like the Harrison Bergeron reference because we're gonna get to a little Vonnegut here because that's important. This is what fair is to me. Number one, did everybody run 400 meters? Did anybody get a head start? No. Did everybody jump the required 10 hurdles during the race? To me, and does everybody is everybody running on the same track? Is every lane up to specification in terms of its width, in terms of its length, in terms of how the mondo is taken care of? And the answer that if all those answers are yes, then from there, that's the only place that you can mandate fair. After that, it's about your training, your talent, your ability, and that's always unevenly distributed. That's always variable. I'll give you an example. When I played high school football, I was maybe 5'4", and I had to cover some 6-foot wide receiver. It's fair. I have a height disadvantage. It is my job to, in some way, negate that advantage. And I had to negate that by the way I covered the guy. I had to negate that by tactics, by training, and by my ability. Because I was small, but I could jump. And I knew how to time a ball, so I could knock that ball away. And also, I have pads on like everybody else. And let me tell you, I'm like a sidewinder going off an F-15's wing when I beat it in on you. You can ask a lot of people that we played during football season about that, and they'll tell you, oh, yeah, Karleigh hits like a truck. You don't want to mess with that girl. The point is, once you get past to me, fairness only applies to the basic rules. Are those basic rules, the dimensions of the field, all those other things, are they the same conditions for everybody? If so, and 99.99% of the time they are, from there, you got to let the players decide it out. You got to let the players fight it out. That's what fair is. Now, in regards to this issue, fair, when we're talking about transgender people in sport, to me, fair has become fair is for cisgender people. Whenever I hear people say fair, it's mostly coming from cisgender people. And what they're really saying is what's fair for cis people. Because what fairness did Lia Thomas get? I mean, Lia Thomas got a media barrage that she did not ask for and should not have gotten. She got a school in the University of Pennsylvania who should have been sticking up for her, and they didn't. And even to this day, they're trying to forget she existed. She had the Ivy League that basically kept their mouth shut until they had no choice but to speak. They had the NCAA who could have squashed all that noise, but instead they changed the rules on her 3 times in 45 days. And then, rather than putting their foot down, they allowed a bunch of paid professional transphobes to fly as far away from England to come in and protest when the only thing they were doing was picking on one kid. Now, I ask anybody, what kind of fairness did Lia Thomas get in any of that? None. So when I hear the term fair, I'll admit it's on deaf ears with me, because what cis people are saying is it's not fair. It's not fair. What they're really saying is what they're really talking about is what's fair and comfortable for me as a cisgender person. So when I hear the word fair, I'll tell you, it falls on deaf ears for me. Because they're not
And
talking about fair for me or you.
specifically with regard to Lia, nobody's looking at her times before uh, before HRT and after HRT. She spent a year swimming after having a year's worth of HRT. She went to the women's team in her senior year.
Yes, after 2 years.
After
2 years of no live fire. Yes.
Right.
And
so the comparisons that are made, it's like if you compare, first of all, they don't look at her times swimming on the men's team the year before she joined the women's team. And they refer to her ranking in that specific year and say, oh my, she ranked 534th among men in a year where she was swimming a year after she started HRT. So
Skylar Baylor kind of put the kibosh on that real quick.
Yeah.
Skylar Baylor already put the kibosh on that.
That whole thing is it's again cherry picking facts, looking out for ways of part of that, as you said, media barrage. It's like, oh, look at that man swimming, and it just isn't. I mean, and people would look at her height. Well, Katie Ledecky is an inch shorter than Lia. Katie Ledecky is the greatest women's swimmer in history. And she's an inch shorter. And if you look at their physiques, they're really close. Well, she has a swimmer's body,
But see, that's the other thing. That's the other part about this, and this is one thing, if this audience has not heard this, another thing to consider is, and this is something that sticks in my craw a great deal, in this discourse, trans women are always scrutinized, especially how we look is scrutinized, the way our bodies are scrutinized. And the creepiest thing is, just a note to all the cisgender people who are in the audience tonight, do us a favor. We of the transgender community would really like it very much if you quit speculating on trans people's genitalia. Not only is it rude, it's really kind of creepy. In fact, it's not kind of creepy, it is creepy. But that's creepy. One thing I've known, and totally and that's one reason why I'm telling you. Right, if you get a chance to talk to Riley Gaines, ask Riley 2 questions. One, why did you lie about having not having a problem with Lia? Because she was on the record in an interview with the journalist, Christina Konrowski. I will put the link in the chat. You can read this interview for yourself, where she said, I didn't have a problem with Lia and no one else did. And now all of a sudden she's talking about Lia is a 6'4" male who is open with who is there with male genitalia. And then Bill Maher, then she goes on this podcast with Bill Maher, and Bill Maher asks, how big is
that?
Lia's
was creepy.
blank?
That was seriously creepy.
But here's the thing. Riley had a chance to push back on that and did not. Just like Riley had a chance to push back when Charlie Kirk was talking about lynching trans people and didn't do it. In fact, she smiled and nodded and agreed like a good daughter of the Confederacy. You see, it's things like that. That's why this issue, to the people who's pushing it, is a hell of a lot bigger than sport. And if there's nothing else, you got to understand that this is not about sports. To the people that are pushing this hysteria the most, this is about saying that Stephanie and I should not exist. That's what this is about. This is about Chris Mosier shouldn't exist. Skylar Baylor shouldn't exist. That some trans kid going to a school anywhere between Maine and Maui should exist. That's what this is about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that goes to the intersection of society and sport, I think, which is why I don't I just cannot appreciate that. Well, I don't really care about sports, but I just think that I'm so supportive of trans women in
No,
every
they ought to
other aspect of life. But when it comes to
No, you
sport,
don't.
there's this. So maybe
No,
maybe I think first of all we ought to talk a little bit. We talked about rules. A lot of people may not realize that there are such things as governing bodies. In all aspects, in whatever sport you're talking about, especially if it's an Olympic discipline. Every Olympic discipline has a world federation and national governing bodies for the way the rules apply to your sport, and among other things, that includes eligibility for competition. It includes the actual rules of the game, like the racing rules of sailing are adopted every quadrennium. They're reviewed and readopted every Olympic quad. Sailing is an Olympic sport. And every governing body goes through this process. So people do need to understand, the people that say, well, I don't really care about sport, I don't really know about sport, but I think trans people shouldn't be involved in sport. It shouldn't compete against, trans women shouldn't compete against cis women in sport. You clearly don't know that trans women have had the opportunity to compete in Olympic sports since 2004. And in the 16 years, in the 4 quadrennia, from 2004 to 2020, 2004, they were first eligible. From 2004 to 2020, only one medically transitioned trans woman has ever made an Olympic team, let alone competed in the Olympics. And that one person, Laurel Hubbard, didn't qualify in the qualifying round to participate in the medal rounds.
No, she didn't.
If you look at her results, it says DNC did not compete.
Well, she did compete. She wasn't able to put up a lift. She wasn't able to put up a lift that could be carded and could be a part of the results. Although I looked at the scoreboard.
It is literally listed as DNC.
See, but things though, she was there, but she didn't put up a result. The thing, even though I think her second lift, I think that was a little bit controversial. I believe that lift was good, and person who's in the sport, powerlifter JC Cooper, agreed with me that her second lift was legitimate, which would have put her. But even if that second lift did count, she probably would have finished like 8th. She would have finished like between 6th and 8th. And I remember JC told me the best she can finish a day is between 6th and 8th. What people forget is the woman who has lifted more tonnage than any woman in the history of women's weightlifting is also in Hubbard's weight class, and she won, like, I think her second or third gold medal at the in Tokyo. A woman from China. You see, but this again goes back to, this is another tactic that the professional transphobes use on you. They pick these sports that they know most people don't follow. They know you don't follow weightlifting. See, they know they're lying, but they believe you don't know they're lying. And that's what a lot of this is about. I mean, and most fans, honestly, they play on the fact that you don't know a lot of these sports.
Karleigh, I got to tell you a little story. I just got to tell you a little story, and it's germane to this. There's a I don't know if you're familiar with this particular channel. It's a channel called Rationality Rules. A gentleman by the name of Stephen Woodford, who has basically been on the keep trans women out of sport tip since 2019. He got himself in some hot water in the atheist community back in the day, and he's basically been on this tip. I support trans people in every other respect of life, in every other walk of life, but not in sport. So anyway, he was a very recent, um, video that he put up. He was having a conversation with Forrest Valkai, who's a biologist and a very intelligent human being and very supportive. And he had all the actual factuals to back him up. And they got into this discussion, and Stephen at one point said, Forrest is another one of these people. It's like, I don't really know about sports. I don't really care about sports. I'm not the right person to talk about this whole thing. So, can we move on and not talk about this thing? Because I don't want to talk about it because I don't know the actual factuals on the sporting front. And so anyway, but that wasn't working. So they finally got to this thing, and Forrest goes, okay, well, if we're going to talk about this, let's take a sport where you think that sex differences are really important. And what does Stephen say? Powerlifting. And it's like, my immediate reaction is, okay, let's talk about powerlifting. Let's talk about the only trans woman athlete that has ever in the history of the Olympic Games qualified to be at the Olympic Games. What was she qualified in? Weightlifting. And how did she finish? She didn't.
Exactly. And by the way, they want to, but that's the other thing. They talk about these
people have this thing in their mind that it's an automatic, it's a gimme for a trans woman to dominate the sport. And it's not, because it's all of those elements we talked about that apply to everyone, not just trans women, everyone. The advantages that you have in competitive sport with regard to access, with regard to training, with regard to funding, with regard to all of these things. You need to have that whole package put together. And you know what? Trans women do not have that kind of access. In the broader sense. As a matter of fact, Karleigh, women don't have that access. That kind of access.
Women, whether they're trans or cis. And you see, that's the other part. But you see, that's the other thing, is that all these people who say, well, I care about fairness for women. These are the same people, especially the sports dude bros. You know, I'm talking about the Outkicks, the Breitbarts, those type of people, and people who actually work for sporting outlets that actually do real sports news, not sports comedy. Mm-hmm. These are the same people that bash the WNBA incessantly. These are the same people that basically ignore Katie Ledecky, except for every 4 years, and even then they ignore. Katie Ledecky is a Babe Didrikson Zaharias level legend in any sport and should be revered as such. Yet we largely forget about her. You should be seeing Katie Ledecky on your Snap, Crackle, and Pop. She should be all over commercials and whatnot. Now, why isn't she?
Oh, yeah.
Why isn't she? I mean, think about it. You actually have a majority of men, and I'm not talking about men who play tennis. I'm not talking about men who actually play tennis. I'm talking about men who sit on their couch and probably play tennis on their PlayStation who think they can beat Serena Williams. Yeah, good luck. I mean, we don't respect women in sports as a whole, whether they're trans or cis. You know, transphobes believe two things. Both of them are false. Trans women are not women, and cisgender women stink at sports. We both know they're false, but that's what they believe. And this is how far the rabbit hole goes. Jason Jacoby mentions this. You know it's bad when they're saying you can't play chess, or no, there are people who complain because a trans woman won a major snooker event. And of course, there's the issue with Natalie Ryan and disc golf, which I find absolutely pathetic. That tells you right there, this isn't about sports to the people that are selling this hysteria, because they're selling anything they can. Remember, these people got unhinged because Amy Schneider owned Jeopardy for 3 months. Think about that. They got mad because a trans woman rocked the house on a game show. Really? Really?
I want to take a little detour here and
All
focus a
right.
little bit on women's sport. And I want to speak to the sport, my sport, the one I know the best, the sport of sailing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
and this is going to touch a little bit on the people that make the rules, right? The people the governing bodies in most of these major sports. The sport of sailing for years and years and years has been a male-dominated sport. Not because women don't have the capacity to compete on the same level as men, no matter what, because sailing is an equipment dependent sport, very equipment dependent, and the equipment is body type formed. But culturally, it has been a male dominated sport. And a number of us over the course of the past literally 25 years, 25, 30 years, have been pushing hard to convince young girls and women that they have to give them access, to give them training, to give them a feeling that they can compete at a very high level in mixed sex competition without regard to that stuff, that confidence stuff. And this is why I want to address the issue of why women's chess, for example, why even have. I mean, I often hear this argument. Well, we shouldn't have separate divisions. I'll tell you why we need separate divisions. Because socially, it is socially important for women, if they want to get involved in one of these disciplines, to have the opportunity to see their way, to see that they can compete, that they can win, to build a sisterhood, to build the connections, to build the connections to training, to build the connections to training in gyms or on the water in junior sailing programs and all of this stuff. That's why women's sport is important. Because
Exactly.
women as a whole have been excluded. They've been told for years and years and years, you're just not good enough. And even worse, if you do win and you're a chick, you'll get the guy saying, well, she's not really a girl.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I heard that a lot. Not pre-transition. I heard that a lot.
Yep.
And from guys who should know better. And they don't, because that's the way we're socialized, the way the whole picture is painted for young women and young men. It's that you throw like a girl, you do this, you do that. You're not as good. You're not
You throw like a girl.
Part of the equation.
Yes, it is.
You're not even in the conversation. So that's why women's sport is important to me. And that's why I've been active in making sure that women, we had U.S. Sailing had a cohort of women my age and younger moving into the administrative aspects of the sport, sitting on the governing bodies, being umpires, being judges, being race officials, doing all of these things. And that has made a huge difference. This year, the Stanford sailing team won the collegiate national championships at Kings Point. They were held at Kings Point. There were 12 people on the team. 9 of them were women. And it was only the women that sailed in that championship event in a mixed field. And they won it by a lot. And it just was.
But yes,
it was
that
just
shows
wonderful. You know, it's like, man, and this is the fruit of all of those efforts. So yes, women's sport is important.
Well,
That's
well,
why
my
women's
thing is-
chess is important.
Well, for me, it also goes that some sports wise it matter. Now, some sports there should be a division, and I'm going to get to my feelings on that in a second. But what happens in sports where basically there's no need for a division? It's just a matter of giving women an opportunity. When a woman gets an opportunity, you get a Shirley Muldowney. Yes, I'm a gearhead, so I'm heavy into motorsports. When you get a woman an opportunity, you get a Shirley Muldowney, who won 3 NHRA World Championships, and basically was a person who ask Don Garlitz how good cha-cha is. He'll be the first to tell you. Swamp Rat will tell you. And I think across the board in motorsports, when women get an opportunity, you get a Danica Patrick who actually won. I know people think she's a joke, but she's a pretty good driver. She's won more IndyCar races than 3 Unsers, 2 Andrettis, Rocky Moran Jr. and Sr., 2 Dallenbachs. So if you really want to look, yes, I said Danica Patrick. I meant what I said. When you give, I mean, come on, this year, I think it was like one of the major ultra distance races was won overall by a woman. When you open the door and just give women the opportunity, women thrive. Now, in a lot of other sports, there's the other part of that, Stephanie, the fact that we can't look at athletic greatness in a woman through the same lens that we can look at it through a man. We can't appreciate that as a society. Right. We can't appreciate that greatness. And to me, as a sports fan, I find that aberrant. For example, we always have to say, well, Serena Williams is great, but she's no Roger Federer. Roger Federer will be the first one to tell you how great Serena is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Women and men, athletic greatness is athletic greatness, no matter what gender it's in. I mean, enjoy the greatness. We can't embrace the greatness. We can't embrace it. I'm a sports fan. I can embrace a LeBron James, and I can embrace a Kalia Copper. I can embrace a Candace Parker. Why? Because I know when I'm watching them play, I'm watching the best at what they do. The same way that I can embrace both Noah Lyles and Sha'Carri Richardson. Because they are the best at what they do. They are the best at what they do. And yeah, big thing flying, Wayne. I agree with you. You have to be one of the best drivers on earth. But there are a lot of women who if you give them the opportunity and put them in the seat, they can kick some butt. And I've seen this because I follow karting. I follow the ladder that gets to the ladder. And I can tell you, I've seen girls dominate a track championship at a kart track and can't get any play. And I've seen mid-pack boys get all sorts of deals. Because they're boys. Never mind that if you gave that girl the kind of backing that some of these boys get, you could be getting a future NASCAR Cup champion, future IndyCar champion, future Indianapolis winner, future Formula One world champion. You could get that. Formula One gives us a perfect example. Ron Dennis meets a little black kid from Stevenage, England, and says, this kid's good. I'm going to give him a shot. That kid's name is Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, that Lewis Hamilton. Opportunity matters. And that's all it takes.
It does matter. It does matter. It matters a lot. You know, my dear friend Don Riley, who runs a professional training program at Oak Cliff, down in Oyster Bay, Long Island, professional training for people who want to get into the marine industry and at the racing level. They run a lot of match races. I've officiated at a few of them. I mean, there's a woman who is a terrific sailor. And she's maybe 20 years younger than I am. and she never had that opportunity until she had an opportunity with the Mighty Mary Syndicate and other America's Cup Syndicate in 1996. She skippered that syndicate. She was great. She was great.
But that's all it takes is just and I think that's the
opportunity.
That's the bigger issue. We need to be talking about women's sports. You know, Ross Tucker, that guy, at that Icons conference in Denver over the summer, also known, I call it Transphobopalooza. It was Transphobopalooza 2 this year. He even said that, you know, if we just dealt with all the, you know, in his South African accent, he's like, if it just dealt with all these things about these trans women, this issue, we could get to the real issues. So he just basically told you with his whole chest that we know there's real issues, but we'd rather waste our time on this, because the fact of the matter is they really don't care about, you know, y'all could talk about the real issues like pay equity, like access in administration, in coaching, greater access for girls, and especially safety for young girls so that you don't have Larry Nassers being the coaches and the team doctors, you know, things like that. You know, we actually could be talking about that, but no, because a lot of the people that are pushing this level of hysteria, they don't care. In fact, look at the organizations that are pushing this hysteria: Alliance Defending Freedom, Heritage Foundation, Focus on the Family. Now go to their websites and read their white papers on any issue that involves women: reproductive rights, safety, domestic violence, access in athletics, Title IX. These are the very people that tried to kill Title IX since Title IX was implemented in 1972. And now they're trying to be the defenders of it. Really? These people are trying to sell themselves. They're LARPing as defenders of Title IX when they know they've never cared. And yes, the Olympic Charter. Sport is a human right.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for. And I want to get back into the sports governance aspect of things,
Right.
And then we'll get into where trans women fit in sport. Let me see if I can get to the right page. The Olympic Charter is Fundamental Principles of Olympism.
Yeah.
Principle 4.
The fourth principle. Read it.
The practice of sport is a human right. Every individual must have the possibility of practicing sport without discrimination of any kind, and in the Olympic spirit, which requires mutual understanding with a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. Fundamental principle.
It doesn't get much deeper than that. I mean, the organization that basically sets the tone for sports around the world is saying this. As far as I'm concerned, that should end the discussion. Unfortunately, it doesn't, because I look at all these
It does not.
national governing bodies, and I'm pretty sure at this point we got to talk about the framework for fairness.
And you guess what? That's coming up right now.
Because that's kind of important.
These are publicly available. I will put. I don't think I put links in the description for each one of these documents, but they're publicly available, and they're not. People don't know that they even exist unless you're deeply involved in sport. Every person has the right to practice sport without discrimination in a way that respects their health, safety, and dignity. At the same time, the credibility of competitive sport, and particularly high-level organized sporting competitions, relies on a level playing field. And we've talked about what is a level playing field, and I think Karleigh was spot on. Where no athlete has an unfair and disproportionate advantage over the rest. Through this framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sex variations, the International Olympic Committee, IOC, seeks to provide a safe and welcoming environment for everyone, consistent with the principles enshrined in the Olympic Charter. So this was issued in November of 2021.
And it went into effect March 1st, 2022.
Indeed.
It went into effect the same month that Lia Thomas competed. But here's where the keys are. The keys are in principles 5 and 6. Principle
That's
5
correct.
basically states that principle 5 involves no presumption of advantage, which means that no athlete is stopped from competing or excluded from competition on exclusive grounds of an unverified, alleged, or perceived unfair competitive advantage due to their sex variations, physical appearance, or transgender status, until evidence, which is principle 6, determines otherwise. Athletes should not be deemed to have an unfair or disproportionate competitive advantage due to their sex variations, physical appearance, or their transgender status. So in other words, the burden of proof is on the people who want to exclude anyone. That's what the framework's supposed to be. Unfortunately, World Aquatics, World Athletics, and a bunch of other governing bodies, World Rugby, they see it as the exact opposite.
Yeah, and I think that they see it as the exact opposite for mostly political reasons. I know that one of the people who was on the rulemaking commission to deal with this issue in World Athletics basically said, well, we considered dropping the serum T level, cutting it in half from 5 nanomoles per liter to 2.5. But there wasn't the appetite for that. In other words, get this fucking issue off the table for us because we can't deal with it.
Oh, that was Lord Sebastian Coe. Let's call and Sebastian Coe, it was for a political reason. Sebastian Coe, what was his job before? He was the head of World Athletics and a regent with the IOC. Member of Parliament, conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Tory. And the current Rishi Sunak Tory government wants to say that conversion therapy for trans people is okay. They want to put tighter restrictions on the NHS. They want to basically are going to make it even harder for trans people to get affirming health care in Britain than it already is. And it's already, ask Katie Montgomery how impossible it can be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a social political project behind all this, and people have to realize it. And it is seeped into the governing bodies with people like Lord Coe, with people like the World Aquatics people, who, by the way, are moving their headquarters from Lausanne, Switzerland to Budapest, Hungary. Talk about holy sport washing, Batman.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to point out Principle 6 in the framework. Any restrictions arising from eligibility criteria should be based on robust and peer-reviewed research that demonstrates a consistent, unfair, disproportionate competitive advantage in performance and or an unpreventable risk to the physical safety of other athletes, is largely based on data collected from a demographic group that is consistent in gender and athletic engagement with the group that the eligibility criteria aim to regulate, which is, again, in many of these discussions, it's like men are stronger than women, men are stronger than women, men are stronger than women. And it's like, that's not the point. You need to be comparing.
You need to compare
women with this attribute.
Women.
Exactly.
But you see, they'd rather go to, and just another note, if anyone ever comes up to you and tells you about a website called boysversuswomen.com, they're not a serious person. They're a transphobe. They have no place to be in the discussion. They lack the range to be in the discussion because men don't compete against women. So why is that even a point? And really, that goes back again to the cardinal rule of transphobes. Transgender women aren't women. Cisgender women are lousy at sports. How can you defend women's sports when you are consistently belittling it? How does that work?
It doesn't. Also, let's just complete this whole thing.
Right.
Demonstrates that such disproportionate competitive advantage and or unpreventable risk exists for the specific sport, discipline, and event that the eligibility criteria aim to regulate. And 6.2a, should eligibility criteria prevent an athlete from entering a given competition, such athlete should be allowed to participate in other disciplines and events for which they are eligible in the same gender category and be able to contest the ultimate decision of international federations or sports organizations through an appropriate internal mediation mechanism, such as an ombudsman and or procedures before the Court of Arbitration for Sport to seek a remedy. And we could get into the case of Maria Jose Martinez Patiño.
Yeah.
Which who much
this,
earlier, this before any of this stuff even
this
came
was 1980. This is the mid 80s. And Patiño, and Patiño is a cisgender woman. It just turns out that they did chromosome testing on her and found out that her chromosomes were XY.
Yeah, and she's the reason that they stopped karyotype testing.
Yes.
She is the reason they stopped karyotype testing for qualifications to compete in the women's division.
But now they want to bring it back.
Now they want to bring it back.
Now they want to bring it back because of the Caster Semenya rule. And Caster Semenya has been fighting him for years. Before that, it was Dutee Chand, sprinter from India. She fought and won. I mean, like I said, Caster, in many ways, that's a different discussion for a different show, but the intersections are clear. I mean, in a lot of ways, Caster had as much to do with race and class as it does anything else. But Absolutely. It is a very similar. It's a similar situation.
Know what? It's not just Caster Semenya. The two women who were prevented from competing in Tokyo were two Namibian runners.
Namibian sprinters, Christy Mbuma, Beatrice Matsalenge. Were both well, they did compete in Tokyo, but the rule was you can't compete in any race between 400 meters and 1 mile. That was the rule. Now that rule has been extended to every event.
Right.
Although now they have to meet a serum testosterone of 2 nanomoles per liter. That's their number now. And they have to meet that and hold it for at least 6 months, which means they couldn't run at the World Championships in Budapest and that is another thing that just shows
let me just make it perfectly clear. Those two women are cisgender women.
They are cisgender women, but
with no karyotype issues at all.
And see, that's the other thing with those two. According to the Namibian Olympic Committee, they had a karyotype test done, and that test came up XX for both.
Correct.
And but that's another piece of this puzzle. A lot of the things that
I sure wish Stephen Woodford was tuning into this.
A lot of these things are not podcast. They're not being told to you. I mean, a good example of this was Lia Thomas. There was so much about her story that was not reported. And there were key facts that had they been reported, people would be looking at this a lot differently because it never fails. Whenever I give people the full timeline of Lia Thomas, they're like, what? I never knew that. I never knew that. I never knew that because it wasn't told to you. Because it wasn't told to you. And these are facts. You can look them up. See, one thing I will tell all of you is that when I say something in a forum like this, you can fact check me. And that's the other thing. I'm a track geek. I will fact check you. And a lot of these transphobes, these jokers, you fact check them, they fold. Because they're trying to sell you a narrative that's false, that when you fact check them, they fold. every time.
They fold, but they don't go away. I mean, they cling, they hang straight on to,
Yes, they do.
to the intersection between sex and gender. And Stephen in particular, this guy really is on that tip. He really wants to make sex a binary so that you can define trans women out of sport, because sport should be based on sex. The gender doesn't enter into it. So that's the tent around the human activity named sport. Because if you can just call it sex, then that explains everything. But it doesn't. It doesn't
even begin.
This also leads.
Yeah.
This also leads to the discussion that the question I posed is, why do trans women belong in women's sport?
Well, why do you think? You've been competing for almost 3 decades. Why do you think?
That is frightening, isn't it? Jesus Christ.
No, I don't think it's frightening. I think it's beautiful. Be thankful that you're at the age you are and you can still get out on that boat. That is, I'm 52 years old and I'm still doing what I'm doing. Thank you, Lord. I'll take it as long as I can get it. I'll take it, because sport is beautiful.
Well,
sport is healthy.
I think trans women belong in women's sport because our teammates want us. Our competitors want us. It's part of our community. Those of us who've been involved in it. Sailing saw me through an awful lot, including transition, and the support I got from people was it was huge for me. It's just huge. And we belong there because we're wanted there. For the most part, most people do not care. Nobody talked about this issue until the mid-teens, when the Heritage Foundation and the ADF and all of these other right-wing groups started pushing this issue to the fore. After they lost the abortion issue to play with, and after they lost the gay marriage issue to play with, all of a sudden it's like, let's go off on this tip. And the very first thing that got me involved in speaking out about trans rights was Health and Human Services, the proposal in 2018 for Health and Human Services to define sex as immutable and defined at birth. That's the very first time I even talked about any of this. And it's just silly.
Very same for me. As I was moving into my own transition, there were these 2 girls where in Connecticut who were running high school track. Mm-hmm. Their names are Andrea Yearwood and Terry Miller. And I saw them run at a meet. And I was wondering, why are they getting booed so much? And people said, like, because those are really boys. And I heard about them. Now, at that time, I'm thinking, oh my God, these people have no idea I'm trans, but they're telling me this. And they're demonizing these high school kids, mind you. This isn't like Lia Thomas who's in college. These were high school children. These were somebody's daughters. These are kids. And I got the opportunity in 2019 to meet them both. And they're 2 wonderful kids. They're in their senior years in college now. That's what gets me about this ridiculous lawsuit by the ADF, by Christiana Kiefer, the character assassin for the ADF, who's hounded these kids for 5 years. It's sick. And again, I'll say it. Ms. Kiefer, you and the Alliance Defending Freedom, after you lose again, need to find Ms. Miller and Ms. Yearwood and give them a face-to-face public apology for the way that you've treated them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not right. You did that to someone's child. And I'd like to ask anyone who thinks that's okay, what if that was your kid? But that's what got me into it. And for me, it's simply put, number one, why should trans women be in women's sports? Simple. Trans women are women.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. But also, Stephanie, you poll most of the people who are playing with us and playing against us, they're like, we don't care. The regulations are in place. Everything's above board. Let's lace them up and let's run, or let's play ball or whatever. And I lived, Stephanie, I lived what you're talking about. I thought sports would be, I thought I would lose sport when I transitioned.
So did I.
Now, 7 years ago, I thought I'd lose sport. In fact, sports means more to me now. And this past year, I had the opportunity to play tackle football, a sport. I grew up in Nebraska, so I love me some football. And to get back and not only play football, but to play this sport as my authentic self, that's a blessing. And because Reapers women's football, yeah, Bear, Sky, Sam, Tina, all y'all, Cruz, Sandy, yeah, I'm shouting you out, Anaya, Puda, yeah, I'm shouting you all out, Cindy Hazel, I'm shouting you all out right now, because this was a team that not only said you can play, they welcomed me. And I mean welcomed. I mean, I'll give you an example of what it meant to have that welcoming. All right, it's our first game. It was in April. And I'm at our first game. It's and it is the second play of the game. We have the ball. Second play of our first offensive series. And the quarterback, Sam Valentino, looks at me and says, okay, we're going to call we're going to call 36 lead. You ready, baby girl? Looking dead at me. Ready, baby girl? You ready to do this, sis? And I nodded my head. Oh, yeah. Because I had the biggest smile on my face at that point. We ended up having a great game, 142-6. I had an interception in that game. I had an interception return for a touchdown in that game. You'll get to see a breakdown of that if you access the Gridiron Girls podcast on our opening podcast. My co-host Shauna Atkinson and Chelsea Poe did a breakdown of it. So it's kind of cool. But the point is that I was embraced and I was welcomed. And in most of these sporting spaces that you're seeing, trans women are there right alongside cis women, and they're saying we are sisterhoods of sweat and sport. And it doesn't matter where you came from, you're a part of us now. And that is the reality. Not what Riley Gaines is trying to sell you. And by the way, I put the link to the article by Christina Konwarski, who's a journalist who interviewed Riley Gaines 2 weeks after that NCAA championship that she tied with Lia Thomas in back in 22, where she said, I had no problem with Lia. She's lying to you. Hashtag just saying.
Drop the link in the chat by all means.
I will. I'll definitely drop that link again, because it's important that you understand Riley Gaines is a paid transphobe. She's a professional transphobe. That is her job. Don't be surprised she's running for Congress in 4 years, bucking to be the next Marjorie Taylor Greene, because that's the thing. How else does a kid fresh out of college, wet behind the ears, all of a sudden have her own foundation? It's part of the Leadership Institute, another right-wing think tank, who's all of a sudden flying around. How in the world is she affording to fly around the country to stump for candidates and speak everywhere? She most recently spoke in Lincoln, Nebraska a few weeks ago, just before their governor signed their ridiculous executive order, which basically said trans people are not allowed to exist in Nebraska. She's a grifter and she's lying to you the same way that all these it's funny, if there's all these detransitioners, why do I see the same 4 or 5? Why do I see Chloe Cole everywhere? An Australian network last night just did a hit piece on trans people, and it was absolutely ridiculous. You mean to tell me you couldn't find a detransitioner in Australia? You had to get America's High Plains grifter to come to Australia? Really? This is what they're doing. This is what the hysteria they're trying to sell you, using sports to do it. But do trans women belong in women's sports? Absolutely. The regulations are there. The regulations have been there. But the real of it is, and we need to get in on this. We need to get on this because we're talking about as we get into the physiological comparison, we need to get on this. The problem isn't with trans women competing. The problem is cisgender discomfort with trans women excelling. Because the fact of the matter is, if Austin Killers had finished 19th, no one would care. If Lia Thomas had not made the finals, no one would care. This would not be an issue. But the minute they won, oops, that's not fair. The minute they won.
This is the thing. The culture of competitive sport, the culture of competitive sport is you do not enter a competition to lose. I am not going to qualify for the World Championships this coming weekend with the attitude that I hope I lose. No. I want to win the damn thing. Yeah. That's the whole point.
But
it's like
think about it.
We're competing for a reason.
Yeah, but Stephanie, think about it. You go to Worlds and win. How much you want to bet? How much you want to bet somebody like the Daily Fail writes, man wins women's sailing event. I mean, that's not a women's event,
so it's not even going to be in there. But it's like,
but still,
sailing's the perfect sport for that sort of thing. It's mostly co-ed, so it's not that big a deal.
But see, here's the thing: it doesn't matter. They will lie to people and say it was a women's sailing event, and people will buy it because they don't do the homework. And that's what I encourage everyone to do. Whenever you're reading this stuff that's being churned out, especially by this right-wing pablum, dig underneath, find out what they're not telling you, because there's an awful lot they're leaving out of this story. And here's the thing: again, they know they're lying. They admitted it on the whole bathroom panic. They admitted we're lying about the bathroom panic, but we know that you don't know we're lying, so we're going to sell it.
Yep.
And
let's talk about the whole physiological stuff, because this gets into the wait a minute, I'm effed up here. I'm out of focus.
Got a little blurry. Did you hit the blur thing?
Blurry.
There you go. You're good now. You're good now.
Let's talk about this, because we touched on this a little bit earlier, that that so many people in these conversations compare women to men, and the unstated assumption is that trans women are men. I mean, they want to hold on to that presumption so badly that when we're talking about this is the other part where the discourse bleeds into the term biological female.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned
biology. Now, here's the thing: one's biology is not strictly linked to any single characteristic that goes into what sex is. Not strictly linked to that. Because what can we talk about? We can talk about gametes. We can talk about karyotype. We can talk about phenotype. We can talk about a whole bunch of stuff that goes into some of it is surface level. Phenotype, certainly surface level. Karyotype is hidden. You don't know anybody's karyotype. You don't know my karyotype. I mean, the tag on my Xitter page there, I'm calling it Xitter nowadays because the X is pronounced SH.
Yep.
But, chromosomal, epigenetic chromosomal anomaly is a tagline on my Twitter page. It's like, you don't know my karyotype, and it's like, I shouldn't have to tell you. Oh, by the way, she said that bar conversation for you. You walk up and see somebody in a bar and go, hey, you seem pretty nice. What's your karyotype? Just making conversation like, hey, how's the weather outside? No, nobody does that. That's bullshit. Mm-hmm. So I'm just, so when you the way sports has approached this is, and I don't want to sound like I don't want to be a transmedicalist here, but that's how sports approaches this in terms of physicality. And the
Right.
physicality is you need to have undergone testosterone suppression for 2 years
Well, and
and
see, even that, but even
and
that
held your
is yeah.
held your testosterone level under it was. They keep switching the things around for under IOC regs for everything but track and field. It was 10 nanomoles per liter. For World Athletics up until this year, 5 nanomoles per liter, and now it's 2.
Yeah.
Except they've gone on this tip where they're just checking everybody out. It doesn't matter. And basically what the process of medical transition involves a rejiggering of your bloodstream to where the predominant sex hormone in your bloodstream for trans women is estrogen. In other words, to try to achieve the same levels of hormonal balance as a normal cis woman has.
Exactly.
As your average cis woman has.
Even though even that is a misnomer. But even that is but even that's a misnomer in a lot of ways, because first off,
sure it is.
Before I go further, first off, I want to talk about biological.
Yeah,
because
you go.
Biological,
I've been talking.
Number one, in this issue, the term biological is not used in a scientific manner. It's used to sell a legal construct. It is used
Correct.
to sell a legal construct designed to erase transgender people. In fact, I put in a link in the chat from Chase Strangio, the ACLU's top legal eagle on this thing, explaining how biological is used as a legal construct. He was on the Gender Reveal podcast last year, and he explained this in detail. And I clipped off the explanation, put it on my Twitter page. So I've linked you to it. Whenever they say, well, you're a biological man, understand that they're trying to make it sound like they know science. They don't trust the science because they don't even know the science. Because for them, it's not about the science. It is about a legal construct designed to shuffle transgender people out of public life. That's what biological is. And at another level, all these different terms, male-bodied. That's a term we get a lot. Male-bodied. But no one can explain what the heck does that mean, because I'll give you an example. If you looked at a photo of my football team, Reapers women's football, if you looked at now these are women who play tackle American football. We have 20 members of our team. They all have 20 different body types. Literally 20 different body types. If you looked at women across a number of sports, look in the WNBA, do they all look the same? No. A thrower in track and field, a thrower is going to have a different body from a sprinter, who's going to have a different body from someone who runs, say, the 3,000 steeplechase, to the body of someone who will be a jumper, to someone who is a heptathlete. There are a whole different ranges of body types throughout all sport. There are no two human bodies that are exactly alike. And when you get down to it, especially when you're coming up to sports, how do you define what a quote unquote female body is and what a male body is? Especially given that, especially for women, so much of that is codified in classism and racism. If I was born a cisgender woman, some people would still say, you're a man. How many times did Michelle Obama get called a man when she was first lady? How many times was Serena Williams was openly called her and her sister Venus were both said they are both men. A Russian tennis official called them publicly both them men. We call Caster Semenya a man. Caster Semenya is a cisgender woman. I mean, come on. We demonize if women, unless they're skinny, white, blonde, and have, perky cheerleader titties, we consider them a man, or we consider them different, or we consider them less than. Let's be real of what we're talking about. Let's be real with how womanhood and femininity have been used to sell some pretty shameful shit. Let's be real about this. And that's important that we have that discussion, because that's part of this discussion. At another level, it's a part of the third discussion. Why are we so uncomfortable with trans women? Trans men? Now, and don't get me wrong, my sturdy brothers go through some stuff.
It's misogyny.
Oh, it's misogyny. It's femphobia. There's racism involved. There's classism involved. There's all sorts of things involved in this. But a lot of it, when it comes down to it, is the fact that if you're familiar with the show Orange is the New Black, what did Figueroa say about Laverne Cox's character? Why would a man want to become a woman? It's like giving up the winning lottery ticket. Now, this was a female character who said this, and a lot of people think that it's a rejection.
A lot of my lady friends, when I was coming out, would basically said, "You know what you're getting in for. You know what you're going in for here, right?" And I have said, yeah, and but not really. One finds out. It's like it's going back to the old, first wave feminism thing. Simone de Beauvoir's, one's not born a woman, one becomes one, and that's, you find out an awful lot.
Yes, they do. But I'm also reading in the chat, Pimienta Negra said, quote, "I would lose against most trans women in volleyball, but I would also lose against most cis women. I'm 5 feet tall." Well, if you can set well, you'd have a place on the team. If you know how to set up a good spike, even at 5 feet tall, you'll have a place on the team. But yes, female bodies vary a lot, but that's also another question. How do we define a female body? For example, could someone look at my body and say, "Oh, I've had someone actually say, "You have a male body." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? With these hips, this butt, and these boobs?" Yeah. Yeah, estrogen works. Okay. It does. But that's the thing. But that's a whole nother thing. In this issue. We're really talking about deeper issues. We're talking about issues of misogyny. We're talking about issues of especially, oh God, the femphobia is rampant. Let's be real about this. All these so-called want to defend sports dude bros. These are the same dude bros who can't walk into a Victoria's Secret without feeling some kind of way because they think lace will be like kryptonite. I mean, let's really think about how we see femininity in our society. Didn't we say that earlier? Don't throw like a girl. Don't cry like a bitch. That's how we are socialized. That is how we are socialized in our society, even now. And even more so, think about it. Think about the ways that they're demonizing change. Perfect example, our military. We need a more masculine military like the Russians. Well, their masculine military is getting their butts handed to them right now. Hashtag just saying. They're saying that our military is too woke and too feminine because we actually have women in the Corps doing things. How are you going to
even
tell
have
me
trans women and trans men? My good friend Torben Hamilton, Dr. Ben, people know him as Dr. Ben around here. He's he's quite a mensch. He might have been available to come on, except he's in residency right now and he's working 72-hour shifts. So he was not available.
He's a person I really want to meet because he's talked about a lot of this and he's talked about it from a clinical point of view. But I mean, here's what gets me about all these guys talking about women can't handle this. Women can't. You have women right now in F-22 Raptors defending your country at 6 Gs. Don't tell me what's capable of what physical. Don't tell me about physical capabilities. You have Just remember, for all you people who have an issue with trans people, remember who is the number one employer of transgender people in this country? The United States Department of Defense. Yeah, there are trans people defending your country. They're defending your right to hate them. Now, you think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. I mean, speaking of it, you were talking about that Air Force study. Remember,
Yes.
we were in the green room. We were talking about that Air Force study,
Mm-hmm.
the Roberts study.
The Air Force study is basically it was fairly recent. I think it was in the late teens somewhere. They went through several years of fitness tests. You know, every branch of the service has a fitness test. Every member goes through a fitness test. They measure planks, they measure sit-ups, they measure grip strength, they measure a number of things. They measure short distance running, long distance running, et cetera, and so forth. And the important part is that they compared the sexes divided. So trans women and women, trans women in women's category, not comparing the trans women to the men, not comparing the trans men to the women. They were measuring within the cohort, which is the only way that it makes any sense to this is the only way to make it makes any sense to have this discussion. And
Exactly.
what the outcome of the study was essentially that after a year, trans men in their fitness performance and the test that the U.S. Air Force gives to men every single year, within a year, trans men's performance was equivalent to, on a par with, the overall the average. You know, they were within the realm of the guys. And in almost every measure, the same was true for women. The exception being lower body speed frac.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't continue it beyond 2 years. And the assessment was after a year. But anyway, one of the first things that happens and this happens very, very quickly with gender affirming hormone therapy, is hematocrit levels, VO2.
Those things drop.
Happens
Those things
within
drop in about 6 months.
Of
Joanna
starting
Harper also confirmed that.
gender affirming hormone therapy. I'm sorry, my earbud just ran out, so I'm gonna have to refresh here.
No, but see,
and
those,
the levels
again,
the levels flip.
but see remarkable. That. But even within that, what Roberts was saying was, at this point, what it comes down to, we need to know more. But what we do know says that the hysteria is largely unfounded. And even Roberts said, you need to have the major part of any future study has to be, you have to compare like with like. He says, yes, these are fit individuals because they're in the military, but still, there's a big difference between a fit individual and a high level athlete. That's a
Correct.
step up. That's still a very different test, but it's a quantum leap. What he's done, what Joanna Harper's done, the new study with Ada Chung, which was also co-written by which was also one of the people that was heavily involved in that was Kirsty Miller. Recently it was published a couple months ago in Australia. Excellent study. Read it, check it out, because it really gives a lot of definitive things, because it brings trans people at a number of ages and levels in sport into account in the study. And they're already trying to discredit it because it doesn't give it gives no oxygen to the hysteria. In fact, it sucks it out of the room.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the physiological changes are profound. They're real. And so if you are, when we talk about fairness in this, say, where do trans women fit in? We can't compete against the men in some sports because we've lost that upper body strength. We don't have that grip. And plus which our VO2 levels are those of women. We're, in so many respects, our athletic ability has changed.
Yes.
It's the baseline where you start from has changed to be more typically.
And basically, and at another level, your body's changed. And see, that's the other part of this.
Fat distribution, huge.
And that's the other part of this that people don't really look at. Beyond all the clinical, beyond the athletic and the clinical, there's the human. And the human part of this is I've got to get used to playing football now. For me, running a race now for me is completely different. I had to relearn so much as far as running, as far as balance, as far as my endurance. I had to get used to throwing a ball while having boobs. I'm just going to put it right out there for you. It's a different deal when you have my coconuts, to quote Kim Petras. It's throwing balls. A throwing motion is very different. The way your body moves and works is going to be different. And yes, it is truly second puberty. Puberty number 1 was awkward enough. Puberty number 2, when you're in your late 40s, early 50s, it's a mind screw, and you have to get used to a whole different level of it. Yeah, but you have to get reoriented your body in a whole different way. It's going to react differently. It's really changed up. Your coordinates changed up. And it just takes time. And that's something you just deal with. And that's something that these are the things that people don't talk about. And
I had to relearn all of the techniques. Yes. I mean, mostly what I do, if I'm not driving is, it's the easiest job on a boat, really. But mostly what I do is trim the sails.
Right.
And that means when you tack, you go from one side to the other, and the big old sail has to go from this side of the boat to the other side of the boat. The wind will take it part of the way, but you've got to get it in. If you're going upwind, you've got to grind the thing in all the way.
Right.
And what I used to be able to rely on, and when I used to be able to rely on upper body strength, I didn't pay as much attention as I should have done to timing. I didn't pay as much attention as I should have done to economy of motion.
Yep.
Because I didn't need to. But I should have done, because you get so much better that way. You don't need to waste a whole bunch of energy. It's rather silly. But when you don't have the strength to do it, when you can't rely on raw strength, you've got to figure out other ways of doing it. And you can. It's not hard, but it takes time, and you have to learn how to move. And as you say, the fat distribution thing, the boobs, the whole, the whole 9 yards.
No,
it's like you learn how to dance in a completely different way.
A different way. Actually, that's one thing that helped my transition, is taking ballroom dance. It helped. It helped me get used to this new body. Dance really helped. Dance class, all sorts of dance classes, Latin, ballroom, jazz, hip hop, Zumba classes. It helped me learn how much my body has changed and how to work with it. But still, see, that's the other part of this. That's the human side that people don't know, because they don't talk to trans people on this issue. And that's what I encourage a lot of people to do. No, talk to trans people who are playing sports, get their stories. Governing bodies should not be making rules and not talking to some trans people who are in their sport.
Well, in the case of U.S. sailing, all of the governing bodies, whether at the national or international level right now, are scared shitless to address this issue, because if they take any false step, they're going to get the right-wing money machine up in their grill. And we're just starting from a
well, see that
we're starting from a disadvantage.
Yeah,
we're starting from a disadvantage in convincing people.
But that's part of what governing bodies need to do.
What it is.
Governing
and
bodies
U.S. Sailing put a panel together right after the in late 2021. Put a panel together, and let's see, there were 2 trans women, and 3 non-binary people in the group, and we made some decent progress. But again, as I said, all of this is on. I haven't heard what we're doing in quite a long time.
But it's good. But one thing, it's good that you're there. It's good that you're there, because we need to be at the table. But at another level, what governing bodies also need to do is not be afraid of the right-wing noise machine. They need, if you're for inclusion, stand for inclusion, and then after that, defend it. That's where cycling's messed up right now. In fact, you're talking about the other thing that they're scared of. They're scared of lawsuits, and a certain Dr. Veronica Ivy is putting up a law, is about to take the UCI to court.
I hope she does.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm a little bit of a betting woman, so I will put a lot of money on some Veronica Ivy winning.
Veronica's been, and here's another thing. It's like when it seems like this issue's coming up again. Like there was a big bubble in 2019 or so. And in part because died down for a while. Yeah.
Well, what happened
died down for a while, and then all of a sudden,
boom. What happened was, first in 2019, you had Cece Telfer. You had Cece becoming the first transgender student athlete to win an individual national championship. I never saw that many Division II track and field fans in my life. And then you had Veronica Ivy winning at UCI Masters track cycling championship, not the elites. This was the sub-elite category. This is basically park and rec cycling for people that have a lot of money or sponsors and a lot of means. And she won her second championship in her age group. And not 5 minutes after she crossed the finish line, you saw it, man wins women's cycling event. The right-wing media jumped all over it. But here's the thing. You have to understand, Dr. Ivy doesn't take any nonsense. You see, when you have a PhD in philosophy and ethics, you kind of know how to stand up for yourself. I've seen Veronica Ivy go on Fox News, and in fact, if you've heard of Abigail Schreier sat opposite of Veronica Ivy on Fox News. This is Abigail Schreier's home field, or as I like to call her, Abigail Liar. She's on her home ground against Dr. Veronica Ivy, and JC Cooper was there. Dr. Veronica Ivy had this girl shook. Every time Abby tried to sell some nonsense, Dr. Ivy was there with the facts. If it was a football game, it would have been 63-0. That's how much Abigail Schreier got embarrassed on her own network. She got embarrassed, not beaten, embarrassed. But there's 2019, like you said, you had all that happen. But in 2020, that's when this legislative wave started, because it started with Idaho. Idaho on the day before Trans Day of Visibility in 2020. Now, mind you, what happened in 2020? March 2020. What was happening?
I think there was some sort of political contest going on in the United States.
No, well, there was an election, but more importantly, that's when the world stopped. COVID. Yeah, that's when the lockdown. That's when basically the world locked down. Yet Idaho passes the first trans student athlete ban. They passed it on March 30th, 2020. And from there, throughout 2020, all these other states started lining up, and it got bigger in 2021. And now it became a flood. Now it's a flood. Don't believe me? Go to the Aaron Reed Substack page. Go to the Aaron Reed Substack page. Look at the map. It's right there. And by the way, if you want to know the ins and outs of what's happening and why this is happening, Aaron Reed Substack is the place to go. I mean, I get a lot of information from Aaron from my own Substack, and I have my own Substack and my podcast. I get a lot of information from Aaron Reed. Aaron's got her finger on the pulse on a lot of the policy that's being passed. And oh, by the way, you probably heard of her girlfriend. A lot of Republicans in Montana wish they hadn't, because she faced them down hard. She
Xitter is a national treasure.
Yes. No, I made a mistake there. Not girlfriend, fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, that's a power couple right there. And I can say this, Zoe Xitter can have a sandwich over my house anytime she wants, because what she did on the floor of the Idaho legislature when they were trying to silence her, and they wanted her to grovel, and they wanted to drag her carcass out on the main street of, yes, she didn't give them 1 inch. And that's what we need from governing bodies. We need a governing. We needed this from David LaPlantier. He's the head of the UCI. When they told Emily Bridges she couldn't race. And what happened to Emily Bridges? That was a crime. Emily Bridges was denied an opportunity that by rule she was eligible for before she could even put a wheel on the track, because Kelly Jean Keane and her merry band of transphobes got in the ear of champion cyclists and told them you can't win, and they believed them.
And this goes back to the question of fairness, right? I mean,
yes.
you compete in the rules. I've done this under the rules. I mean, I was sending my fucking blood work to
yes.
world sailing. I mean, I've done all this stuff within the rules. No, but it's like, okay. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, no, you're a man. Just go fuck yourself. You got rid of. Do people realize that in order to be a woman, you got a certificate of femininity before 1998? And you know how you got it? You stripped naked in front of a bunch of old white men. That's what you did. You bent over and you played around with yourself.
And you actually had to. If you want to know what it took, I'm going to put this link in there too, because one thing I know you want to talk about was the history of women in Olympic sport. And it's important that people understand this history. Understand this history, because it plays so much into what you're seeing right now. Because originally, elite sport was never for women.
That's correct.
They didn't want women in it. They didn't want
figure
women
skating.
In elite sport. Yeah, they didn't want women in it. They didn't want women in elite sport. Oh, heck no. They didn't want women in elite sport. Baron de Coubertin said it. The sport is for men. Women have the babies. He said we didn't want women's athletics in the Olympics. But then in the 1920s, the women decided, okay, if you're not going to let us do some things in the Olympics, we create our own, and the women were out drawing the men. The reason why the FA in England banned women from football for 50 years is because the women were outdrawing the men. They had a women's match, and the women drew like 50, 60,000 people. When the men were drawing.
Here's another example. Let's take. Okay, here's a competition, an Olympic competition, skeet shooting.
Yep,
skeet shooting in Barcelona. A Chinese woman got a gold medal
right.
Skeet shooting. 4 years later, in Atlanta, there was a women's division because she beat all the guys. Suddenly, well, we can't have that. She's not a real woman. Well, maybe she is. Let's get her off the podium. Let's not have her gold medaling. Let's not do that. 1902, the Olympics in 1902, a woman silver medals basically in figure skating.
Right.
And then suddenly there was a women's division. I mean,
And then there was the 19. Then you had this renaissance of women's sport, at least in this country in the 1930s. Yet you had a lot of women who wouldn't want to go to the Olympics. The Fenton Flash didn't go. The Fenton Flash only went to one Olympics, and she was the fastest woman in the world. Babe Didrikson Zaharias only went to the Olympics one time. And some people say that she's on the short list of the greatest women ever in American sport. Now, why is that? I'll tell you why. Slavery Avery Brundage. Not only was he an anti-Semite and racist, he was a raging sexist. He was a raging sexist.
Slavery Avery.
That's terrible. That's what Tommy Smith and Carlos called him. That's what a lot of the black athletes before '68 and the possible boycott called him. They called him Slavery Avery. But also during that time, Mexico City, leading up to 1968, there was another thing. And there's a dramatization of it that I'm linking right now. That I'm linking to you. Where that shows exactly what Stephanie was just talked about. You see, in the Olympic sports in the 1960s, to try and determine who is a woman or not, what they would do is they would literally have women come in, meet a bunch of doctors and a bunch of officials, and they would tell her, take off your clothes.
Yep.
And if you think I'm kidding, no, this was done. This is done. They literally said, okay, you're a woman, prove it. Take off your clothes. And there are some people that want to go back to that. I know one person who wants to go back to that. There are certain athletes who want to go. There are certain people who are former athletes who say we should go back to that to make sure that there's no trans getting in. Once again, it's that creepiness about genitalia. It's that creepiness. And again, cisgender people, if you hear other cis people talking about trans people's genitalia, tell them to cut it out. Only you can stop creepiness. Only you. But that's the thing. And the fact is, for so long, you didn't have women in athletic. You didn't have women in sport. Then you had women in sport. And then you say you had to have only a certain kind of woman in sport. And we still hold on to that. We have to have a certain type of woman in sport. That's where the Caster Semenya rule is coming from. Because I truly believe, because the current rules as constituted, as far as differences in sexual development, who's been getting hit by those rules? Who's been getting hit by them?
Cis women.
Not even Senora Patino was treated the way Caster Semenya and Duty Chandler treated. The only women that have fallen under the current
black women
DSP rules are women from sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. You've had 8 women that have been formally sanctioned by World Athletics or the IOC for this, and they're either from sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia. And the way that Caster Semenya was treated was a crime. And that right there, I truly believe that no Western nation would let any of their athletes be treated that way. I don't even think an African American athlete would be treated that way, would be allowed to be treated that way. Imagine if Caster Semenya would say if what happened to Caster Semenya happened to say Abby Steiner, or Femke Bol, do you really think the Dutch Federation or USA Track and Field would let their athlete get treated like that? No, they'd be screaming bloody murder. They would be screaming you would literally have the head of USA Track and Field slapping Sebastian Coe across the face for something like that. But it's okay if they're from the global South. So we have to look at the classism in this. And that is another intersection. And that is a history that's part of the history of women's inclusion in the Olympics. Now, trans woman inclusion, you've only had it since 2003, and you only had one athlete and an alternate, and you had people who had to sue over it. I mean, you had the cyclist in Canada sue over this and win when they tried to take her rights away. And that's another part of the history that people do not talk about. It's an important part of the history, and she's still fighting on. She's still talking. She's still giving speeches. She's still in the fight. I'm going to look that.
There's so many people on YouTube with big channels out there drawing the line against, trying to say I'm an ally.
Yeah, Kristen Worley. Look that name up. Look up Kristen Worley. Because of her, we're still in the fight. And because of her, they tried to mess around with her. She was a mountain biker. And she was among the first athletes to compete after the Stockholm Statement in 2003 and the 2004, and they messed with her every step of the way. And she ended up taking them to the Court of Human Rights in Ontario and winning.
Well, I think we've hit a number of points here. We've hit the social implications of excluding trans women in this area of human life.
It's implications across the board. It's not just in this human right. It's a domino effect. You know what they said? Well, if we can keep them out of sports and keep those kids out of the locker rooms, keep them out of the locker rooms, keep them out of the bathrooms, keep them out of the bathrooms, keep them out of school, keep them out of public life. Because notice, right after the sports bans in a lot of these states, what's the next thing they're talking about? Affirming care. Oh, we're going to ban affirming care. See, and affirming health care for trans youth, you know what that would do? That takes this issue right off the table, because kids are going to be because kids are never going to see the other puberty in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have and they don't want that, because it takes power away from people that want to control the social order. Let's talk about what this is really about. And those are the social implications. Those are the social and societal implications of this. This is a domino effect. Like I've said it all throughout our podcast tonight. This is not about sports to the people that are selling this hysteria, because what's coming after the sport ban? Now they're talking about affirming care. And what's the next thing after affirming care? Affirming care for everybody. That means me and Stephanie and everybody else. They're saying, well, if we can restrict it to 18, we can easily restrict it to 26. 3 states are trying that. And 2 states, Mississippi and Tennessee, want a total ban overall. Florida's banned it de facto by saying we won't let an insurance company that covers affirming care to do business in our state.
Mm-hmm.
Two things that make sure you can't be transgender, and you can't want flood insurance in Florida. That's the quickest ways not to get covered.
Yeah.
Just saying. But I mean, those things, sports is in many ways the gateway drug to that. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I fight. Yes, I'm an athlete, but also I'm a person, I'm a citizen. And they're using this to try and sell a level of hysteria that's so great, not just in the United States, but across the world, even in places that are considered democratic. They're doing that to sell a certain social political agenda. And and they've admitted this. When they're done with trans people, we'll go after the rest of those letters next. Some places they're already doing it. Look at what Italy's doing. What Mussolini's doing. I mean, Giorgia Meloni is doing in Italy, basically saying if your kid has 2 moms or 2 dads, we're taking one of them names off that birth certificate, you lose your parental rights.
Right.
Think about that.
That's
they're going, hey, but that's what they're doing. They said, and they admitted to it. we're going to separate the Christian right, the right wing Christian dominionists. They said we'll tolerate the LGB, but we're going to split the T off. And once we're done with the T, we're coming for the rest of you, which means marriage equality. They're already talking about overturning Obergefell.
They're already talking about
They
that.
want to do that. They want Obergefell gone. They want military service gone. They want employment gone. They're already going. They already got Roe v. Wade, and they got Roe v. Wade when you weren't looking. During Transphobia 1 last year at the conference I was telling you about. That happened that conference started 2 days after the court case that basically took Roe v. Wade off the table. That basically decimated Roe v. Wade. And now these are hard. And now these are supposed to be the feminists. I call them the feminists. You know, people like Nancy Hogshead Makar, the big Title IX voices.
Yes.
These are the hard-hitting feminists. They didn't say one word about that. Not even Martina.
You know what?
Not even Martina Margaret Cordalova said a word about that.
Karleigh. Yeah. And these are the people that don't realize that they will be impacted. And the people they care about will be impacted by all of this because it doesn't stop with us. It won't stop with us.
You let it go too far, it'll get to something maybe cisgender women will care about, Price Waterhouse. And they've talked about that. Clarence Thomas says we can go after that too. Price Waterhouse case, which basically allows you to wear if you want to wear pants to work, you can wear pants to work. No one can ever say you're not feminine enough to work in our company or work in our business. They want to change that up. The people that are pushing this hysteria want to take you back to a Leave It to Beaver trip in the 1950s. And they're more than happy to take you there. Some of y'all need to wake up and realize that if you go too far, you're going to wake up one morning and find out your name is Offred. Yes, that was an Atwood reference. I went there. Have a think about that.
Yeah, it's bad. We're at the tip of the spear. Sometimes it looks different at the tip of the spear. And the thing that's tremendously frustrating to me is to see people speak around this issue as if we're not here. We're already erased in their mind when it comes to discussing this issue particularly, and you know, when you take it from let's just discuss this philosophically in front of our 350,000 followers, in front of our 500,000 people that follow me because I'm a philosophy nerd or a science nerd on YouTube, 500,000 people, 1 million people. I'm just going to take this philosophically. Oh, I'm an ally, but not here. And that's like, sorry, mate, if you don't care to educate yourself as to what is actually involved here, you insist on speaking out of your ass, then you're not an ally. You're not. You're just not.
Yeah, exactly. But see, that's one of the issues. There's a lot of people who see this as this esoteric debate. Your esoteric debate is my life.
That's
and the worst thing is and then you've got people who ought to know better, like a Nancy Hogshead Makar, like Martina Margaret Cordalova. I will always refer to Miss Navratilova as Margaret Cordalova. She's a bigot, just like she hates Margaret Court for being anti-lesbian, but she says the exact same things that Margaret Court says about trans women. I mean, remember the same things that Martina said about trans women, the Sun and all those tabloids are saying about her 40 years ago.
That's correct.
But we don't want to touch that, do we? And that's the thing. For a lot of people, this is an esoteric debate. No, and then there are the people who insist that you and I
Karleigh,
come into
it's how I make a living. You know, it's like,
what?
You know, I'm sorry, but this is how I actually put the water in the kettle and keep it boiling. Yeah. It's not, this isn't trivial. And I'll be the first one to tell you, part of my work is dealing with the fallout of all this. When I'm not doing this job, I'm an operator for Trans Lifeline. So I hear from trans people
across North America and around the world daily who are scared out of their minds about what could happen. And also just need the, and I'm trying to get the basic, I'm trying not to get bullied at school. I came out to my parents, they kicked me out of the house. Help me. I need a place to live. Or I can't, or I'm a parent, I'm in Texas, and my child, and I cannot have my child with these laws. I have a trans child. I need out of this state. Help me. So no, I'm right there with you. I see this work and I do this work. And sport, something I love, is being used to advance this. That pisses me off. I'll say it. That upsets me, angers me, scares me, and it drives me, because you're asking the question of what sports mean to me as athletes. This is what sports means to me as an athlete. Sport is just a beautiful thing, but to me, the bigger thing is, what does the opportunity to say hit that field with the Reapers, for example, or do a road race mean to me just as a person? It's a piece of me. You can't cut that away.
That's right.
You can't.
That's right.
That's a piece of my humanity that you're taking away. And if I cede you that piece, the people that want my humanity gone will take the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. And it gets to be like, I'm a trekker. So I'm getting a little Star Trek into this. Jean-Luc Picard talking about the Borg in First Contact. They assimilate whole worlds and we fall back. They take us and bring us into their collectives and we fall back. At some point, the line must be drawn here, no further. And there are people who say we give up sports and we fall back. Then, give up healthcare and fall back. No. The line at my human rights is drawn here. And this is where it starts. And I need, not just me, Stephanie and I need all of you. I'm talking to the cis folk for a minute. You want to be an ally? This is how you earn the title. You don't give yourself the title, you earn. That title's not given. And in fact, I don't want allies. And this is where I get hammer and sickle with you. I want comrades. I need a comrade. I don't need an ally. I need comrades. I need people that will stand shoulder. This is our Stalingrad. I need someone standing shoulder to shoulder with me right here. I need you there. I need you there. I need you to not only say, I've got your back. I need you shoulder to shoulder. And at times even standing in the front and saying, no. We need cis folks to act a fool so that we don't have to. Because believe me, trans folks, just by walking out there, have got to be brave, have got to stiff our necks. We need those who are claiming allyship to really step into it. Because not only is it going to be better for me, it's going to be better for you. Because the same people that want to shuffle trans folks out of American life, they're the same people that want to take your vote away. They're the same people that want to Calvin ball your democracy. They're the same people. What say you, ally? What say you?
Indeed. For someone to say, I have your back, I'd like them to notice just once the wall it is up against and the firing squad that's in front of me. Saying you have my back in that instance is like, would you like this last cigarette? Doesn't work. You need to understand we are seriously, that what is it, 30 some odd states now with bills to basically criminalize doctors?
Yes.
Criminalize people. For the sake of what? For the sake of making 0.5% of the population miserable, taking away their humanity.
No, there's a question in the chat. I think we both need to answer. It's a question right there. It comes from Ox. as a cis white male boomer, what's the best action that we that do care can help the most? The best action is open your mouth.
Damn straight.
The best action is just that, to act. That means when you're hearing anti-trans nonsense in your office, at your dinner table, at your club, when you're playing cards, when you're watching the ball game on Sunday, call it out. And I understand that's not going to be easy because you may be outnumbered. You may be the only person in that room who will call it out, but we need you doing it. Even you have to call it out and stand up even when your voice shakes. And I'll tell you, Ox, your voice will shake. It will. When I admit, I admit I am calling you to a mission that is not easy. I am calling you to a mission that is hard. I would be the first to tell you that. I am calling you to a mission that is difficult. And I will be the first to admit that. And I will tell you right now, it wouldn't surprise me if you turned tail and ran, because you'd be surprised the number of people that do, because that fear of being ostracized is great. But the fear and the stakes of if you don't are greater. Because that's the one thing, and I have to remind myself every day. When I walk out my door every day, my head is on the swivel. And I understand that. I know when I walk on a football field, there is a chance someone's going to get their nose out of joint. Or when I do a race, there's a chance someone's going to get their nose out of joint. There are going to be people that will look at me a certain way for a lot of reasons. If it isn't for the fact that I'm trans, it's for the fact of my skin tone. More often than not, it's both. And I understand this walking out the door, and I have to deal with it. I don't like it, and I'd rather not, and it's scary. And right now, being black and trans in this society, I am scared. But nonetheless, I am more scared of what happens if I don't walk out that door, if I don't do that job at Trans Lifeline, if I don't do the writing I do for Outsports. And much love to Sid Ziegler and Jim Budzinski and Kenny Schultz and Shelby Weldon and John Holmes for letting me be a part of that team, a team that's doing some awesome work to talk about sports, to talk about LGBTQ people in sports, and to show that, yes, courage is contagious. And that's the best thing I can tell you, Ox. Courage is contagious. If you stand up, someone else will stand up with you. But it starts with the one. So the answer to that question, the best action you can take is exactly that. To speak and to act, even when your voice shakes, because you will get others. And sometimes it just takes the one. It just takes the one.
Well said. So you mentioned Outsports, which is a great piece of media. There's a link to their webpage in the description. There are links to Karleigh's info in the description. Anything else I'll get up as needs be. I welcome your comments. I really hope that you will share this this time that we've had everywhere you can. You don't see this kind of content on YouTube. You don't see this kind of discussion with two trans women who are in the midst of this, whose lives are affected by it. You see Rationality Rules. You see Professor Dave. You see, I don't know, somebody basically saying, oh, philosophically, there's this. Oh, scientifically, there's that. Well, we're people, folks. We are people. We are not abstractions. You see Sabine Hofenstatter working way out of her fucking lane as a physicist, talking about medical care for people, psychological care
come on,
for people.
You see Fonda Beatles, the bug lady, and Tommy Lundberg and Ross Tucker, a person who wouldn't know, who doesn't know, he's a doctor of medicine who doesn't know medicine, and he's supposedly a sports analyst that doesn't know sports. I said that. You're hearing from everybody except the people you need to be, that should be in this discussion. People like Stephanie and a Chris Mosier and an Alejandra Caraballo and Caitlin Burns. The only Caitlin, a trans Caitlin you ought to listen to.
And
Frankie De La Creta, Tre'vell Anderson, Rachel
Veronica
Elliott,
Ivy.
Veronica Ivy. You need Hope Giselle. These are people you need to be listening to because they're trans people who can speak to what's going on. Like I said, Caitlin Burns, a Caitlin you ought to listen to. Don't listen to creepy Caitlin Jenner. Just don't.
Don't.
And all these people out here, and for the love of God, once I'm going to put that up. I'm going to put that up again because if you don't know how phony Riley Gaines' ear is, we're going to school you on that. We're going to school you because I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of these people out here grifting and bojangling for some dollars and bojangling for candidates. There's phony as a $3 bill. And once again, if you want to know the facts about Riley Gaines and how she got from just swimmer to transphobe, there it is. There's the link, and she can't deny she gave the interview because she did. It's on the record.
Shit. You know what? Send me the let's see if I can get the link in private chat, because none of your links.
I'm getting it right. I'm getting it. No, the links have been showing up in the YouTube. They're showing up.
Oh, okay.
The links are showing up there, but the links are showing up. I also sent that link to you in our private because I want everyone to read what Christina Konrowski wrote on this, because it's important, because you're seeing all this Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines went from obscure swimmer who finished 5th to now having her own institute and a podcast, and she's been flying all over the country trying to tell you that Lia Thomas is this evil devil man. Yet the fact is, this is artificial. It's artificial. It's phony.
Yeah, the chat's telling me that your links haven't been showing up, and I can't seem to find my. Oh, there, care.
If they haven't been showing up, then how in the world am I seeing them?
I don't know. Let's just Kristen. Yeah, here we go. Hold on a second.
Also got another link out there about the facts on Chloe Cole, the transitioner, or as I like to call it, the High Plains grifter. How am I seeing them?
Wait a second. I don't know.
How am I seeing them, but nobody else is?
All right, there's the Riley Gaines link. What else you got for me? What else can we throw out there?
Oh, I've thrown out there. I just threw out the link. A good friend of mine, Dawn Ennis, wrote the ins and outs of the whole thing with about the High Plains grifter. And people have been throwing out my YouTube channel link. I'm also going to throw out my Substack link because I have a Substack. And also since you're linking up to my YouTube, I'm also going to there's my Substack link. And also, since you got my YouTube,
you gotta put it in the private chat so I can make sure it gets out here.
All right, I'm gonna put that in the private chat too.
Let me get all that. Yeah, you need to be a mod in order to get the I'll make you a mod on my channel, no problem.
No, let me see. There's that YouTube. And
Matter
then
of
here's my
fact,
Substack.
put something that is not a link in the side chat.
I've been putting things that are not
Just-
links in the side chat.
Well, do it right now.
I just sent a message saying I'm glad you're
There we
all
go.
here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make you a mod, and then you can link all of these things for yourself. Add as moderator. There you go. I'll make you a super moderator, Karleigh. There you go.
Oh, I appreciate that, but I really want...
now just go for it. Unload.
Okay,
This is Karleigh unloading the links.
Yeah, I'm just gonna unload.
I want to thank all you guys for showing up here, by the way. Thanks so much.
I also want to.
And again, I want you people to share this video, especially if you have any sort of connection with let's say I think I saw one of Dougie's fans in here. I want him to see this. I want Stephen Woodford to see this. I want Professor Dave to see this. I want people to see what two people are dealing with right now, so they can get their heads out of their butts and start thinking of us as human beings.
Well, see, that's one that
radical,
exactly,
not radical people with an agenda.
Well, see,
and get the actual factuals on this stuff instead of making stuff up. Oh, by the way, if you haven't already, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel and maybe buy me a cup of coffee and help me keep going, because slim pickings around here these days.
Hey, you can always throw me a donation. You can do it through my Substack, because I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm building a podcast. We're working some things out. I want to keep as much as I can educating the people on the human side of this, because that's what this is really about. This is the human side.
It really is
of what's happening. There's a human variable. There's a human piece of this that needs to be talked about. And in fact, there's one from my old podcast, The Transporter Room, which is still archived, I might add. I was sending on that thing. Yes, you were on it. Fun. In fact, you were on it. You were on that. Ooh, your last one. It was actually around this time last year. You got beamed up around this time last year. So
I did.
And it wasn't too long ago when, unfortunately, the support dried up. Parent corporation of Outsports, Vox Media, pulled the plug on on the podcast end of things earlier this year. So we had to find some ways had to find some different ways of doing things, and we were off for a little bit, but now we're back and we're moving. In fact, here is the interview I did on the Transporter Room with Stephanie last year, where Stephanie talked about a lot about this, but also got deep into sailing. You also get a lot of Stephanie's backstory, and that is fascinating to see how she got from A to B to T, and continues to trim the sails and sail for the stars and win big doing what she's doing. And there's also another one that I want people to listen to, because this is a voice that people don't hear enough and people need to hear. And this was an interview that for me was a dream. The interview I did last year, not long after what happened in Atlanta with Lia Thomas, with Dr. Veronica Ivy. And that was important. And I think that's a voice. The Dr. Ivy, that's another link I want people to hear, because This is how awesome Dr. Ivy is. And more people need to know this, and not enough people do, that Dr. Veronica Ivy was one of Trevor Noah's last guests on The Daily Show. And few people knew that. Dr. Ivy was on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah last year. And talking about all these issues. And it was perhaps the largest platform that she's ever had. And she did excellent. And if you want to really get some good education on the legal, the philosophical, and the scientific ends of all these issues, that interview is worth your time. It's more than worth your time.
So we've been going for a while here. Again, I was just kind of checking stuff.
Stephanie, one thing I do want to say before we head out is good luck to you with the regatta that's coming up.
Yeah.
I hope that you get to Worlds. I hope that we see you sailing in Seattle for a world championship.
I want to be sailing in beautiful Puget Sound, but I need to convince my owner to take Andrew, we can go across country, no problem, as long as Andrew, you promise not to have the truck blow up again and burn all my effing clothes so that I show up in Toronto for the Worlds with nothing to wear. That was fun. That's a good story. I'll have to tell that sometime.
Andrew, if you get a bid to Worlds, you got to go to Worlds. It's even more important if Stephanie is part of a crew that's going to Worlds. That's even more important. Sports needs to see that. Sports needs to see her. And trans people across this country need to see that. They need to see that one of ours can go, that one of us can still compete with the best in the world. And all people just need to see that, hey, keep the doors open. You're letting the fearful and the bigoted close doors that should never be shut. It runs contra. It runs contra to who we are as an American people. It runs contra to the American character.
One last thing. Some of you who've been around my channel for a while know that I gave a talk on Trans Day of Remembrance at a Methodist church, a local Methodist church. The pastor is an old friend of mine from sailing. She asked me if I would give this talk. Her child, I think eldest child, I think so. I think he is. But when I was working at a community sailing program, this child was uncomfortable. He felt out of place. His instructors were sort of and I tried really hard to make sure that kid was comfortable and felt good with the program. Kid got a little bit better. Both of his parents are sailors, like avid sailor types. They chartered my boat for a season, actually. And anyway, this kid goes to Sailmain and participates in that. Well, 4 years later, that kid told their parents that he was trans. And because his parents knew me that kid survived. And because that kid knew me, that kid grew up to be a strong, healthy young man who's in college and loves sailing. So when we talk about holding the door open, it's for those kids that don't that otherwise will have their lives cut off, that will have their that will not be able to live fully as who they are. And some of us of a certain generation remember what that felt like. And it took a lot of years to escape from that. So, what I'm saying. Anyway, sorry to be so heavy at the end of the stream, but Karleigh, thank you so much for coming again. I just checked. I'm like 19 away from 200 subscribers. I'd appreciate if you'd share this and all the stuff, and follow Karleigh on YouTube and all the other places. Read the Substack, and again, I so much appreciate your being here and putting this together, because these. So that's it. Said we're gone.